Everybody, welcome back to the Teaching Tax Flow podcast, episode 149. We are, one away from 150. We got something special planned for you. Maybe we'll give you a hint. Maybe we won't. It's kind of like Christmas. Your parents wrap something up, let you see the gift, but you can't open it yet. We're going to get into it. But this episode specifically, doing something related to other ones, but we're going to dive a little deeper into a process or a strategy implementation process, to be exact, which is used in Teaching Tax Flow, but also in Chris Picciurro, who is my co-host, if you haven't met him yet, in his private practice. So before we get into it in detail, let's take a brief moment and thank our episode sponsor.
This episode is sponsored by Wealth Builders Mortgage Group, powered by Movement Mortgage, one of the top mortgage teams in the nation and a powerhouse in the real estate investing world. With over $1.1 billion in closed mortgage volume, and more than 3,000 investor deals under their belt. They don't just talk the talk, they walk it. Their team specializes in helping short-term and long-term rental investors scale smart with customized lending strategies. They offer all STR loan products, including second home, investment, non-QM, bank statement, asset-based, and HELOCs. They also offer all primary home loan products too. Whether you're just starting out or expanding an existing portfolio, their unique Path of 10 strategy is designed to help you move from a 9-to-5 job to financial independence. If you're looking for a lending partner who truly understands the investor mindset, visit wealthbuildersmortgagegroup.com and start building your roadmap today.
All right, everybody, we are back here again on the podcast. Chris Picciurro, welcome back, sir. How are we doing today?
It's great to be back. How are you doing today?
Okay, you know what? I'm doing good, man. I got a different hat on. I pulled this one out of the archives, I think, and if anybody that's watched this, you probably have never seen my hair done. And I do that for a number of reasons. Heck, there's a strategy behind it. Not a 4-step strategy, what we're about to talk about, but there's a strategy behind it. I don't want to make Chris jealous.
Right. You don't want everyone, you don't want to show your flowing locks with a bald man.
Hey, it happens. And that's, a good thing we didn't do podcast or videos way back in the early ones, because that's my longer hair. I cut like 12 or 13 inches off at one point. It was pretty long, but who cares about hair? That's not why we're here. We're talking about implementations, right? So,
Yes.
and those of you that have listened to previous episodes, you've heard us always talk about strategy and tax planning. You're probably saying, all right, I know what this is. I don't need anything else about it, but I guarantee you have not heard this on this podcast. So we're going to jump into those 4 steps. Chris, I'm going to let you kind of drive this one a little bit and walk us through these, because I know this is something that you guys in the private practice, your private practice with your business partner, you guys have really developed this, but then it's morphed over time. It's not like you woke up one day and said, yep, this is it. This is the 4 steps. We're going to try this. You guys have really built this on the backs of working with clients and that letting it kind of drive this development, right?
That's correct. So we have developed a proprietary personalized tax planning process. I'm going to share it with the listeners, the viewers today. This is something that we work with our private CPA firm clients, basically holding their hand. We call it white gloving it. That being said, the purpose of this podcast episode is not to bring in tons of people into the private CPA practice as clients. The purpose is to give people an idea of the way we operate in our private CPA practice, and also an idea of how they should be doing tax planning from a mental standpoint, from a process standpoint. Because what we find in our tax planning is, I want you to think about this as you watch or listen, the process is the same for every case, but the results are always unique. And that's what's important. Anyone can do tax planning and strategy. What we're finding out there is that too many people try to reverse engineer the tax planning process. Most tax professionals are very equipped to do tax planning and strategy with their clients, but they just don't have a process either. So what happens is they're reluctant to provide those services because clients and taxpayers are constantly coming in with what we call ideas, what we call prescriptions, without going through any type of process to determine if it's suitable. So sometimes you get clients coming to you or taxpayers coming to you with an implementation, meaning they've deployed a tax planning strategy. However, they never went through the process to determine if it makes sense. A great example, John, would be, let's say you live far out in the country and you decide to buy an electric vehicle and you're really excited about it, and then you realize there's no charging stations within 100 miles of your house. Now you've just forced yourself to basically put a charging station in your house. Now, most people that buy an EV put a station, but that's just an example of an unintended consequence. So you've got to determine kind of the end result and what you want to accomplish. What we're trying to accomplish, legally and ethically reduce the tax you pay in your lifetime. So I'm going to take you all behind the curtain and walk you through our 4-step process. Now, the process starts with a current year tax projection. You can't figure out, this is life in general. This is a trip, right? If I said, John, I want to drive to Orlando, Florida, the city beautiful as we all know it, you would say, great. The first thing you have to figure out is, where in the heck am I, right? You have to know where you're at before you can figure out where you're going. First step, figure out where you're at year to date. When you are watching this or listening to this, look at the date and say, okay, if the date is August 31st, September 30th, October 31st, if the year ended at the end of the month I'm listening to this podcast or watching it, where would my tax return stand? What is my situation if I do nothing? That's your starting spot. If you don't do that, you can't go through the process. How can you get to your destination without knowing where the heck you are in the beginning? So figure out where you're at. That's your prerequisite.
And you made a great reference earlier on. It was a medical one, right? It's similar to, bypassing the doctor's office and going and knocking on the window at the pharmacy, tell them you want medication for a pain you have, except they force you, hopefully, force you to go to the doctor before you pick up a script, right? But, and this, what you're saying, right? People trying to reverse engineer it or kind of skip ahead because they think maybe there's some fluff in the middle of it. The result, basically implodes on itself.
And just because there's 4 steps in this process doesn't mean it necessarily has to take a long time. That's the other thing. So the first thing is figure out where you're at and figure out what your MTR is, marginal tax rate. That's different than your tax bracket. That's more important than your tax bracket. It's your number one KPI, key performance indicator for your tax planning. Marginal tax rate. Remember, one of the 3 laws of teaching tax flow, that tax agencies are your involuntary business partner. Tax laws are written to encourage and discourage certain economic, social behavior, financial behavior, et cetera, et cetera. So your marginal tax rate means this: for every dollar that you're putting on your tax return and reporting as taxable income, how much is going to your business partner? That could be the IRS, that could be a state, that could be a city. Once you figure that out, then you will diagnose yourself. We use color-coded diagnoses in teaching tax flow. You could use whatever you want. We use red, green, purple, gold. So a 25% or higher marginal tax rate means you are in a red diagnosis. Okay, green means lower marginal tax rate. Gold is tax-free income and growth. Purple is tax deferral. Again, that's just a teaching tax flow system. I want this to resonate with everyone that watches and listens. So diagnose your situation by determining your marginal tax rate. From your marginal tax rate, then you need to prescribe different tax planning implementations. So for instance, John, if you are in a very low marginal tax rate, we would call it green, but don't worry about that necessarily. Let's say you are a teacher. You just got done with college. You have your first job. You're in a 12% marginal tax rate. It's good to put money into retirement. Great. Put it in your Roth. Don't put it into your traditional IRA or 403b. Why? Because you don't need tax deferral. You don't need the red diagnosis, which is tax deferral, taking in the deduction today. You want tax-free income and growth. Again, another example would be, let's say you have a property, you're going to sell a very large capital gain, and you are in a very high marginal tax rate, and you're in a situation where you don't necessarily need that cash in your pocket. You're a red diagnosis, then the prescription of a 1031 exchange might make sense. So the prescription has to match the diagnosis.
And
right?
if people are skipping ahead, right, then they're just kind of doing it off of we'll call it a gut feeling, which in this case, it's frankly it's pretty lazy
It
because
is like
you
it's
have
not. I
everything
mean,
in
I guess
front of you.
it's
Look at the
lazy.
darn thing.
It's just uninformed. I
There
don't
you
think
go.
people are trying to be lazy necessarily. I think they're just uninformed. And then within prescriptions, understand there are different prescriptions. Some tax planning implementations are behavioral. Some are tax advantage investments. Some are tax mitigation strategies. We have tons of content elsewhere in Teaching Tax Law and on our YouTube channel that dive into each specific strategy. But always diagnose, then prescribe. The third step, we call it an IQ test, identify strategy, quantify result, but think about it as a suitability test. Does this make sense? So, for instance, let's take an example of, let's say you were thinking about investing in some type of 15-year investment. However, you're 95 years old and that might not be a suitable time horizon for a 95-year-old person to invest their assets in. Maybe they'll live to 110. Hopefully they do. The point is suitability. I'll give you one more example on the suitability. So a lot of times people come to us and say, I want to maximize the amount I can put into retirement. Great. If you're self-employed, let's say you make, a $500,000 a year. First of all, good for you. We might be able to design a retirement plan where you're putting away $150,000 to $200,000, way more than the 401k, using like a defined benefit plan. Whoa, I don't. No, that's that. Hey, I want to put money away. I thought the max was 60 grand. So the point is, you've got to talk about the liquidity. So the better question for someone like that is, well, how much per year are you comfortable with earmarking towards retirement? Then you build that whatever plan around what their liquidity is.
And
So
that's really finding the perfect partnership in your tax professional too, right? Because obviously somebody that's not and not talking bad about anybody specific, but somebody that just files returns and calls it a day, right? Like that's if you're the type of person that this is something that you're after, then you're probably not a best fit for that type of tax pro,
right,
right?
when we're
Because there's a lot
talking
of knowledge of what's going on and changes.
when we're talking about tax planning and strategy, we're talking about everything moving forward. Tax compliance is everything looking backwards. So sometimes you can implement a tax strategy or tax planning implementation after the end of the year, but vast majority is forward looking. So diagnose, prescribe, what we call IQ test, but think about suitability. Does it make sense for you? Are you required to be an accredited investor? Ultimately, when you're looking at that menu in the restaurant, if you don't like onions or you have the palate of a 10-year-old like me, don't order something that is going to have stuff in it you don't like.
And
Then
he's
the
not kidding,
final step.
folks. He likes some very plain stuff.
I'm a plain guy. The final step
Okay.
4, implement. And John, you hear this multiple times a week from me. Ideas are cheap. You can find them on TikTok, Instagram, etc. Implementation is valuable. Make sure that you implement the strategy properly, the tax planning implementation, and use the right partners. So for instance, if you want to do that 1031 exchange, I've literally had people over my 22 plus year career say, I'm doing a 1031 exchange with a property I sold. Great. Who's your qualified intermediary? Client. No, they're not a client. Actually, our clients are very important. Taxpayer. I haven't found one yet, but I closed and I just put the money in my bank account. I'm going to give it to the QI, qualified. It doesn't work that way, right? You haven't implemented it properly.
Game
So,
over.
implementation is key. Make some things you could self-implement, like a health savings account, going to the bank and creating that. But a lot of times you need to build your team to implement. And so if you're listening or watching into this and you feel like you've got a good idea of what you want to do and you need that help with implementation, check out the Teaching Tax Flow Hub. John will put a link in the show notes. And we're happy to connect you. So that's a 4-step process. Let's keep it simple. Let's keep it quick. Diagnose, prescribe, IQ test / suitability, implement, repeat. Every year is different.
Bingo. So yeah, this one we kept a little bit more condensed. And what a great topic to do this, right? Because we started off saying that it doesn't have to necessarily be lengthy and very complex. I mean, for the client part. You have the right partners, right people on your side. You can power through it pretty quick. Chris, yes. So now we mentioned a little bit earlier on that people aren't necessarily lazy, they're uninformed. But now that you, who's ever watching or listening to this, now you're informed. So now if you don't do this, now you're being lazy. We'll put it that way. But on that note too, we will drop that hub link in the bottom. Go check that out, defeatingtaxes.com. We'll send you directly to the private Facebook group that you can ask any question under the sun within that box of tax. We're happy to answer it. Somebody from our team, extended team, as well as others in the industry and the community members. Everybody kind of chimes in and helps each other out with that. The great thing is very easy to moderate because everybody behaves themselves. So we have no problem. That's why we kind of open it up. And as always, again, creeping up on that 150, we got something pretty cool that we're going to go through on that one next. But really, that's it. It's as simple as that, you guys. Check it out. Questions, you know where to reach us. And we will see everybody back here again next week on the Teaching Tax Flow podcast. Let's try this one again. Different week, same day of the week, different time of day, completely different topic. We'll see everybody soon. Have a great week.
The content provided is for educational purposes only. We encourage you to seek personalized investment advice from your financial professional. For all tax and legal advice, please consult your CPA or attorney. Investment advisory services are offered through Cabin Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cabin Securities, a registered broker-dealer. The content of this podcast does not constitute an offer of securities. Offerings can only be made through an offering memorandum, and you should carefully examine the risk factors and other information contained in the memorandum.